Good afternoon, everyone. This is all about conversation, so I guess it will drive a two-way conversation. Just want to set the stage for the gentleman to take over conversations as conversations or conversations as brand conversations or whatever. I think I don't know if all of us, but many of us have actually grown up from the era where we did not have so much digitization or mobiles in our life or multi-screens in our lives, right? So we've grown from there and come up now where brands used to talk one way. So I as a brand, I'm giving you a message, and you as a consumer listen to my message, see if it suits you, and then take the corrective action or any action or do a conversion which would lead to my sale. Also in that era, I think the communication channels were not as many as they are today, in today's age. We're working in an absolutely new media age, which went on to say in a digital age, and I think in today's day and age, it's already becoming a mobile age. So audiences, what are they doing? They're spending too much time on digital, which doesn't mean that the offline part of media or communications is not still functional or working. We have gentlemen here whose advertising happens on television all the time. So those mediums stay. But I think new media per se is something that is taking stage because audiences and consumers are spending a lot of time on the digital domain. And it is not only across time paths or day paths, but it is also happening across devices. So you've got multiple screens and multiple devices and different sizes and shapes, yeah, and different speeds, which is something where there is a lot of conversation going on. Now, as brands, would we want to really add value to that conversation? Conversations from brands becoming extremely important because they need to connect with the consumers, they need to engage consumers. Both connect and engagement are two words which have been abused to God knows whatever degree. But the fact is, yes, you need to connect with the consumers, you need to engage those consumers, and in a meaningful way. I think it's extremely important for the conversations to happen in a meaningful way, because if those conversations are meaningful, then they are adding value to the entire situation. So without taking too much time, I'll really keep the stage open to the gentlemen to talk about what conversations, if at all, are their brands driving? How are they adding value? Are they making their brands meaningful? So we've got people from Coke and from Mahindra. As brands, are they engaging and conversing with consumers and making it more meaningful? Or with Vikas and George here, how are they doing the storytelling? How are they writing this conversation which brands are using to entice, engage, and connect with the consumers? So over to you, gentlemen. Deepak, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you. And as one of the official storytellers of Coca-Cola, I'm very happy to be here. What I wanted to just tell you was that while a lot is talked about social media, I'm talking about conversations which have happened, say, about a decade back. And when you look at those conversations, they were not digitized, they were not, you didn't have Twitter, Facebook, etc. But how were those conversations, what my colleague said, engaging or empathizing? And I'll give you one such example because that happened to me. So about 10 years back, I just joined the company, and a very old couple from Australia came to me and said, look, our son is somewhere lost in the hills and we are not able to connect with him. And I made them rest, sit down, heard their story, listened to them. And I said, what is the issue? So he said, look, we've been all over. He's 19 years old. He was last seen in Dharamsala about a month back. And we feel that despite going to so many regulatory bodies and police, etc., we still are not being able to find him. And I thought to myself, what is it I can do and help them or empathize with them at this point of time? So what we did was we made some posters which we put up at all our retail outlets. And why they had come to us? Because they had heard about a company which goes through distribution every nook and corner. So it was about something which they wanted to say about how to, not through a lost and found police department, but through engaging with, retail trade, which we helped them to put together their message. And we reached out to the various retailers, wholesalers, and the distribution trucks in the Dharamsala and the area around. They went there, they came back, yet success was not met. But the fact was that when they went back to Australia, they talked about this point on Radio Australia, which was one of the largest radio channels over there. And it was an overwhelming experience for them because, right now at one point there was all story of sad and gloom. At the same time, here was when they went, everybody in Dharamsala knew about their son and they were talking about it, how to help because of the messaging which had been done through, what we did as a company or a brand. Why I'm telling you this is because the world has changed. The conversations will happen with or without business. That's important. But what is, how can brands be a part of them or can be without a part of them? The other part is we had a one-way advertising, brand Coke would be seen on TV, on radio, and you viewers would see the brand, and the engagement was they would participate in a contest under the crown or some other contest where they could win. But now the conversations are different. Because when you look at, when we launched Coke Studio, we said we will engage through music on Coke Studio. Great experience. We have just launched Coke Studio Season 4. But what we have learned to do is, it's not about impressions. It's about expression. So one big learning for us is we moved from impression to expression. And when we look at impression to expression, how? In Coke Studio, when we launched in Season 1, we were told all the feedback we started getting was, this should be, okay, this is good, but we want it in this manner. We want fusion. We want new genre in this particular way. So when we launched Amit Trivedi, video on YouTube this time, it had an instant hit of 1 million views, which was not the case about 4 years back. So we are listening. And I think important part is that when we listen, how do we, express our brand's happiness and, take it to the people at large. The second impact I just want to tell you as a part of a social media conversation, what we did, Coke Zero launch, we said it will be, media-led and social media-led. And I'm glad to tell you that, my marketing team can come and talk about the number of million impressions which they got. But the point was, we decided to distribute a first FMCG product through Amazon in India. And when we, launched that product, that created a buzz. For us, we had decided that, okay, we'll subsidize the freight because we were doing it for the first time. But in 48 hours, 100,000 cans had been ordered. And it would have gone on, but the fact is, so that is the power of social media today. And I feel conversations will carry on. And I was just telling conversation is about baat niklegi or dur talak jayegi. The point is, how do I fit into it? How do I engage with the consumer? And how do I empathize with it? I would come back, but just some thoughts to begin with.
Yeah, so great conversation examples from the official storyteller from the House of Coke. Interestingly, I think if you've seen, it straddled through both the eras. So there's an Australian example where distribution actually led into conversations on that little boy who was missing, to today Coke Studio, which is all about expression and not impression. So look at the kind of conversations which are happening and completely in sync with how the environment and the ecosystem is changing. So to add to that, some more stories from you, Vikas.
Thank you. And completely agree with the line of thinking which Deepak started on. I think when we started out, the when at least I started my career in the business of brand building, the whole ecosystem used to be about how do I identify the most valuable single-minded proposition and build a communication around it that's going to be so memorable that people will eventually start talking about it. So the currency used to be buzz creation, talkability, and stuff like that. I think what the fundamental change we've seen over the last half a decade, almost on steroids, is brands no longer have the ability to engineer the conversations with the authority they used to be able to. Because what's happening now is that the role of the funnel has actually gotten reversed, where conversations are happening with or without you as a brand, and the challenge and the onus is now upon you to find conversations where you as a brand can play a meaningful role. And I think that's a huge fundamental shift, because it starts impacting the way we approach the subject of brand building altogether. So if I were to just give an example from one of the brands we handle globally from India, it's a soap brand called Lifebuoy. I'm sure we've all grown up seeing that red bar of soap in our bathrooms or in our drivers or our servants' bathrooms.
Tandurusti ki raksha karta hai.
Tandurusti ki raksha. And I think for almost 5 decades in India, the brand has been present, and globally, for a long time, it was a 3-way battle in this category called health soaps, where Safeguard was the world's #1, and then the battle was Dettol versus Lifebuoy, until about 5 or 6 years ago, where we took a sharp turn in the way we approached the subject of brand building. And the whole thing went from just telling people to be healthy to actually playing a role in the health conversation around the world. So it's led to initiatives like working with the United Nations to create a World Hand Washing Day, because there are still about 35 to 40 countries in the world where we still have people dying because of hygiene issues. And about 3 years later, again, the conversation we picked up was this entire subject of infant mortality rate in the developing and emerging world. And we literally started a global mission of helping a child reach 5. And for that journey, and while it seems like a brand doing CSR, please don't kid yourselves that this is a CSR activity, because this is a hardcore brand and business building activity. Because what we couldn't do in the previous 50 years and have managed to do in the last 3, that we are now the largest soap brand on the planet at the back of a conversation we started about helping more children in the world survive to the age of 5 and see their 5th birthday. And we've seen tremendous impact of this in country after country, including India, in the entire developing and emerging world. So I think the net of where this is actually getting to is people are having conversations, and the onus is now on us as brand builders to have the humility to see where I can, as a brand, fit into people's lives rather than tell them a story and want them to come into my lives. So I think that's probably a way I would look at it, Anita.
So absolutely interesting storyteller from Story Writers. Interestingly, I think we're not saying anything different, whether it's from the brand side or whether it's from people who create stories, because it's all about, I think we need to come to terms with the fact that brands are no longer heroes. Let's please understand that. From the time when brands were the heroes and you had a proposition and you made communication around it for people to remember, no longer that's what is happening. So conversations are happening with or without brands. So how you as a brand are actually bringing meaning. You know, while I understand the hand washing day by Lifebuoy was completely a business proposition and it must have tripled the sales of Lifebuoy during that time, but what is it doing? It's making the brand fairly meaningful in the lives of the consumers. It's not CSR. It's all about making brands meaningful. Yeah. So would you want to drive conversations, Vivek from Mahindra?
So, you know, when we talk about conversations, conversations are between the brand and your target audience, or between the target audience back to your brand, or between the target audience talking to each other. And I think the role that the brand can play today is of creating a platform where all 3 can happen on topics which people want to talk about. And my perspective on that is that what people want to talk about in digital and social media is what they actually talk about in real life when they meet their friends. So, if you look around you when, people meet their friends, you find conversations happening around movies, around music, around food. Luckily for us, many of the people talk about cars and SUVs. So that's where we come in. So, luckily for us at Mahindra Automotive, because there is a large chunk of people wanting to talk about cars and SUVs, we are able to, have conversations around our products, our features, what prices, and so on. But that, I think, is a conversation at a very basic level. To get to a higher level of conversation, at a deeper level, at an emotional engagement level, I think you need to pick on an insight which is relevant to your brand. So we at Mahindra Automotive about 4 or 5 years ago picked up this consumer trend which we saw in India, which is people's lifestyles and aspirations were changing. There are a lot of people talking about going for weekend getaways, road trips. Some people were even more ambitious. They wanted to do Delhi to Leh Ladakh and back, and that kind of stuff was really, really emerging about 5 years ago. Today, a lot of people do it. So we started this initiative called Mahindra Adventure. We created a website, we have a Facebook page, we are on Twitter, and all our brands, whether it is Scorpio, XUV 500, Bolero, etc., have their own pages. But the conversations are around road trips, around off-roading destinations, around weekend getaways, around expeditions, rallies. Now we do about 25-30 such events, from one-day off-roading adventures to multi-day, 10-12 day expeditions to places like Leh Ladakh, or even from India to Nepal to Bhutan and so on. So we have conversations going around on these topics on the platform that we've created. We share information about the events that we do, and we get people who participate in these events to come and share their pictures, their stories, and then the conversation gets amplified to millions of people. So the actual people who participate are maybe 50 or 60 in one particular event, but the conversation starts happening 10x, 20x, 100x, and I think the beauty is that is a conversation that people want to have, that is relevant to them, and the brand just plays the role of creating a platform where those conversations happen. So that would be my submission. And the other thing I want to say is that I think each brand needs to find the relevant role or the relevant topic where the conversation, where they can fit into the conversation. Sometimes I see examples of brands trying to force fit themselves into certain conversations, and I think that's bizarre, because people are not interested in your brand, they are interested in the topics they are interested in. So if your brand has a role to play, if it has a relevance in that topic, then sure enough, join the conversation. Otherwise, I think avoid, because otherwise you'll be an unwelcome guest. So that would be sort of my perspective.
Deepak, you want to add something to this?
No, I just want to add one point is that, there is a belief that the companies own the brand. But the point is the consumers own the brand.
Right.
And I will just give you one example and insight, because our insight is happiness. And, the Facebook page of the Coca-Cola, which was started, it was not started by the company, neither an ex-employee nor an employee, but by two people, two consumers in Los Angeles.
Fans of Coke.
Fans of Coke. And they took it up to a certain level, and we helped them in content later on. Today it has 95 million fans, and that's something which, and each one is telling their part of the story. But that was something which I thought was important, that when you are looking at brands, you have to look at it that your consumers are wanting to talk about something. You don't get up in the morning and say, I'm going to have a Coke today. No, you will have it with a meal, with a friend, or having an occasion, or when you are thirsty, you may need a beverage. And that's the need state. So I think these 2 points I thought were important when you are building conversations. it's important to know, and I will reiterate again, that as he said, adventure was the theme. Mahindra was only a platform. So here, happiness is a theme. Facebook, Coca-Cola page is just one platform, or Coke Studio is just another platform.
Sure.
Thank you.
So just to mention the points which Vivek mentioned about was, obviously insights are key. I think we all know that unless there is a consumer insight, we cannot build any communication or a conversation around that. So from adventure, which is a key consumer insight, as far as the Mahindra group is concerned in the automobile division, the conversations obviously have to be driven around what that particular vehicle is doing, and clearly in this case it's about adventure. So the key point there is really relevance. I think we heard Rahul in the morning as the keynote saying fit of purpose. I think extremely important to have fit of purpose, because otherwise you can have conversations as many, but they'll be meaningless. So relevance is extremely important in that area. George, you are from the digital era, right? You are the digital creative head. So how do you look at conversations from that perspective? Because we've had enough of perspective on, non-digital as well as digital and social, etc. But typically you, because you work in that sphere and the new age, how do you look at conversations?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear? Yeah. Okay. Basically, I'm a writer, and I kind of, have created various kinds of content, all my life. One of the things that I think of when I start creating content, and I'm speaking completely from a personal standpoint, is basically, especially and that's particularly relevant for social media, where you're basically coming into conversations. You have two roles to play in a social media platform. You are either creating content, or you're joining content, or joining conversation. So what do you want to do? If you're creating content, I think the stories, the art of digital storytelling is all about being real. And people who do it really well, some of the brands that do it really well, one of the earliest examples I could think of was BMW about 15 years back, when Fallon did 5 films with some of the top Hollywood directors. And I think to this day, I don't think, that's probably one of the gold standards yet. A couple of the other brands that do it really well is Coke, obviously does it brilliantly. And they've turned, their own vending machine into a complete, conversation starter, They've done some brilliant work, turned a, icebox into almost a human character. Another brand that really does it well is Red Bull. Red Bull allows you to live completely vicariously through their brand, basically. You might love to do, mountain biking or base jumping, but you don't have, what to do with. But, Red Bull basically hooks up, athlete or a professional bike rider with a GoPro camera and gives you 3 minutes of some of the most exhilarating footage. And you can be part of that same, experience of riding a bike or base jumping. I think these are 2 or 3 brands that I really admire from a Ogilvy point of view. I think last year, around Valentine's Day, British Airways came up with this, couple ticket to London. And I think the whole thing of romance and Valentine's Day and this couple thing, the whole idea that Ogilvy came up with was to take a very, very, everyday Bombay couple living in a, one bedroom hall kitchen kind of scene, living in an absolute joint family. You have no time for each. The wife is completely slogging in the kitchen and cooking, cleaning, washing. The guy is working 24 hours as a young executive. No time for each other, no time for romance. The whole idea was to pick up that, and this character, the guy, the whole idea is that this guy goes one day, surprises his wife with a ticket, couple ticket to London, and it's a beautiful 4-minute film that got a lot of traction. It got a lot of, free PR and all of that. That kind of, and the point I'm trying to make there is those 2 characters were so real. People really thought that those 2 were real individuals, really saying, rather than, seeded characters. So that's what really was the point in that film, and that gives you an example of how to, when you keep real conversations and make the story real, people will share it, people will care for it, and people will join that conversation. Yeah.
So interesting point of view there on content. I think this whole conference will talk a lot about content. There are specific sessions which are happening on content, but really content is becoming important, whether it is to do with, the adventure drives, whether it is to do with the Coke studio, or whether it is to do with the BA Valentine stuff. So clearly content which is real, content which is relevant, content which is engaging, and content lastly which is very, very meaningful is something which is the talk of the town, right? So that's what George...
If I can add, can I just add one point? So, I think if you are having conversations which are relevant and engaging with the audience, the beauty is that the content starts coming from everywhere, and that's been our experience. So, we within our team and with our agency create, lots of content in terms of pictures, videos, and so on. But what we found over the last few years is that we get some amazing UGC, user-generated content. There are some lovely pictures and videos that come in which then gets shared through the entire community. And in fact, that becomes a motivation for people to come and share. And I cannot imagine trying to get that content for love or money. I mean, people send in pictures of a Mahindra Scorpio with a lion somewhere in Africa. Or, an XUV 500 standing in front of the Vatican. I mean, where the hell will I get those kind of pictures or videos? So
clear relevance that the brand is driving amongst audiences.
But the content generation then spirals. Yes. The onus is not on the brand only to create content. The content comes from everywhere. That's the beauty. Absolutely. If you're having the right conversations. Right.
You want to add something?
Yeah, in fact, he resonated a lot of what I was going to say. But I think the whole thing is that it's the same art of conversation. It's like there's a giant party out there where there are thousands of people having conversations at all points of time. As a brand, if you don't have anything meaningful to say, probably stay quiet and observe for a while. But if you find a way in where you can actually add value to the conversation, people can actually surprise you by the enthusiasm they will demonstrate to actually champion your cause.
Great. So guys, if I was to really sum this up, a few pointers as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure it will resonate with you as well. Expression versus impression. I think expression is extremely important because that's when you engage with the consumers and the audiences, they express themselves. Yeah. Talking versus engaging, as Vikas said. I mean, we've been talking enough. Let's engage and bring meaning to the lives of the consumers. Relevance and key insights, absolutely, absolutely key. And like I said, relevant and real, as well as engaging and meaningful content, which is very important. And this whole thing about user-generated content, where you are actually engaging with the audience, bringing relevance to their life, making it more meaningful, and getting them to share and spiral. So this is what conversations are all about. So I'll end this by saying, before the questions happened, that baat niklegi to fir dur talak jayegi. So this will really go a long way, as long as you make that baat really meaningful. So open to you guys. Any questions that you would want to ask the panel here?
Hi, I'm Gaurav from Bajaj Auto, and I have two questions. The first question is for Mr. Deepak. Sir, while you talked of conversations, I want to know, were there cases, or do you think there is sufficient global conversation? So for example, let's say there would be conversations happening in India. There would be happening in Mexico or Colombia. Is there a concept where this is common or global, considering Coke is a global brand? Do you see such cases?
Look, usually local conversations are contained locally. I mean, for example, if a conversation is happening on something in Mexico, typically a few global citizens may comment on it, but typically it will be in Latin America, the conversation would be contained in. But, you know, my friend here talked about the small world machine. Now, the small world machine we had done, in the Middle East. We did it on India-Pakistan. That became a global conversation because when we launched that on YouTube, I mean, it became an instant gratification, and everybody wanted a comment on that. Not only the traffic was coming from India, or the Indians in US, or the Pakistanis in Middle East, but it was coming from all across. So that is where the trigger happens. And similarly, we celebrated the launch of Contour bottle. Now the Contour bottle is now 100 years old. Now that is because it is there in almost 126 countries, the Contour bottle. So that became a trigger for a big conversation across every nation, every market. So these were two interesting triggers which I thought are good examples. But local conversations which are relevant to local market will always remain very, very local over there.
Sure. Thank you, sir. My second question is to Mr. Vivek. Sir, you talked about Mahindra Adventure. While this concept suits the four-wheeler category that you have, you also have a two-wheeler category. You also have Mahindra, Club Mahindra, for which this platform is suitable. So did you limit yourself to four-wheelers, and like you said, we should ask for more and more UGC and we should integrate as much as the conversation can build up? Did you leverage it across the products that you have?
Honestly, no. I think right now the space Mahindra Adventure is in is largely around off-roading, road trips, expeditions and rallies. So it's very specific to our SUVs. And you know, I think you have to be relevant to audiences, and if there is a natural fit, only then one should try and extend. So I won't like to force fit things. Right now, I think the balance is just right. This is what people are wanting to talk about, and we have millions. I mean, we have millions of fans who are having these conversations on all our brand pages. So maybe it is a possibility in the future. I just want to add to what Deepak said about going beyond borders. So Mahindra is now into Mahindra motorcycle racing, the MotoGP, and Mahindra is also now into Formula E, the electric car Formula racing. And those conversations are happening internationally. They are happening with fans from multiple countries, whereas Mahindra Adventure today, because it's to do with what we do in India largely, is largely contained within our shows. Of course, we do have some fans joining in from outside, but largely it is India. But some of these global properties that we are involved with, those conversations are happening internationally.
Sure. Thank you.
I think we've got no time for questions. We started 5 minutes late, Vineet.
Hi, this is Hita from Digital Market Asia. I'm on your right. Yeah, my question is, Mr. George said that we can either join a conversation or create content. So when you're joining an existing conversation, isn't there a risk for the brand of its content running out of relevance? Because there will be user-generated content, they will be talking about it, but if you're thinking from the perspective of a brand, maybe the conversation runs out of relevance and maybe their reach is affected. If you're joining a conversation, the content is not created by the brand or the advertiser, it's coming from the user side. So isn't there a risk? And how do brands tackle if such a situation arises?
I think firstly, when you join a conversation, you're already joining conversations. What do people normally talk about? They're talking about movies, music, sport, those kind of conversations. So if you see brands that are choose to join conversations, they will usually have, something related to music or something related to, movies or something like that. Another Coke example with Spotify, Coke and Spotify, they did a playlist of music and that really joined people who are 18 and 20-year-old. So, and running out of conversation and user-generated. What was the last part? I didn't get the last part.
For the brand, if it's running out of context, if the conversation which is happening is not affecting them.
That's staying relevant, right? That's the challenge when you're creating a piece of content, how relevant you are to the group you're joining, basically. So, and developing content that people have interest to and people want to join. That's a challenge most of us have, right? my occupational hazard, actually.
So guys, sorry, no more time for questions. Thank you so much, and I hope and wish that you found this conversation relevant and meaningful. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we have another huge round of applause for our wonderful panel members here?